Shields and swords, feel the wars, fighting my blood down to the core. Warriors from medieval age, fear the reign of night brigades. Crusades into the room, moving through the temples and tombs. You scared and place, prepare to face. Professor Awesome and the minions of doom. 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 Professor Awesome and the minions of doom.
So, in History of the Kings of Britain, generally, Geoffrey of Monmouth is trying to create a sense of the greatness of the British people before the coming of the Anglo-Saxons. But there's something complicated in that, and that is that before the English or the Anglo-Saxons came and defeated them, the Romans came and defeated them, and they became part of the Roman Empire. And so, of course, historically what happens is the Romans come and they do take over by conquest, but for several centuries, the Britons are part of the Roman Empire, and they become Romanized over time. Well, there's a kind of, I guess, capitulation to the Roman Empire that we might see that as. Geoffrey clearly cannot depict it in that way. It has to be shown as something different. Also, we have to remember, what are the themes that Geoffrey seems to keep returning to? Well, one of them has to do with how dividing the Britons is always dangerous, and treachery is the problem, right? We have to be loyal to one another, and we cannot be divided. So, what does Geoffrey of Monmouth say about this? Well, first, he gives us some things that Julius Caesar says about the Britons, and some things that the British leader says in response to this. So let's look at those right now. Julius Caesar describes the Britons saying, "Those Britons come from the same stock we do, for we Romans too are descended from Trojan stock." Skipping ahead. "All the same, unless I'm mistaken, they have become very degenerate when compared to us, and they can know nothing about modern warfare." Later, King Cassivellaunus replies to Caesar, "What you've sought from us, Caesar, is an insult to yourself, for a common inheritance of noble blood comes down from Aeneas to Britain and to Romans alike, and our two races should be joined in close amity by this link of glorious kinship. It is friendship that you should have asked of us, not slavery. For our part, we are more used to making allies than enduring the yoke of bondage. We've become so accustomed to the concept of liberty that we are completely ignorant by what is meant by submitting to slavery." Okay, so as we see there, we begin to see Geoffrey puts in Caesar's mouth an acknowledgement that they are of the same Roman heritage, sense that the Britons are also the same heritage, but an accusation that the Britons are in some way degenerate or just not as great. They're not the good line; they're the bad line of the Romans. And notice that the response of the Britons is not to say, no, you are the bad one. Instead to say, no, you have to understand, we should be in alliance with one another, right? And it's interesting, this then sets up not to say that the Britons should have, at this point, defeated the Romans, and that they're the true ones and not the Romans, though we may see something like that later on. Instead, what we see here is them saying, no, Romans, you don't understand. We need to be united, and our strength comes in unity with one another. And so because of that, then if you look at this section having to do with the Roman period of the Britons, Geoffrey really depicts it more as at its ideal, an equal partnership between the Romans and the Britons, and a reunification of the people who come from Troy. After Troy fell, these people then need to be reunited, and that's where their power comes from, not that the Britons are a subjugated people. Of course, as things go on, we eventually see some treachery, divisions, and the ultimate result of that is, of course, the Romans end up pulling out, and this is going to lead to problems. And so without the Roman military, we see that things don't go right. And so the Britons here, this is a setup for the coming of the English later on, that is, say, the Anglo-Saxons later on. But the Britons here, they try to find a way to essentially regain their national spirit and their ability to defend themselves as a nation. So let's look at another passage here. In an address, Archbishop Guithalinus rouses the Britons, saying, "Given that you were only ordinary folk in the days when you possessed soldiers, do you think that for this reason you've lost all claim to manhood? Surely men can be born out of their social caste, a soldier from a farmer, for example, or a farmer from a soldier. Surely a military man can be the son of a shopkeeper, or, for that matter, a shopkeeper the son of a military man. Given the possibility of one caste being born from another, I find it hard to believe that people are such that they can actually lose their manhood. If you are men, then behave like men. Pray to Christ to give you courage, and then protect your own liberty." However, things don't work out, and in some editorial comments, Geoffrey says, "However, it is easier for a kite to be made to act like a sparrowhawk than for a wise man to be fashioned at short notice from a peasant. Oh, how God avenges himself for his past sins. Alas for the absence of so many warlike soldiers through the madness of Maximianus. If only they had been there in this great disaster. No people could have attacked them whom they would not have driven away in flight. This was made clear enough as long as they remained there. In those days they occupied Britain in all tranquility, and what is more, they added far distant realms to their own power. Thus it is when a kingdom is handed over to the safekeeping of its peasantry." So what we're seeing here is an attempt to reestablish the British as able to defend themselves, but that it is too little too late. And he says, basically, if Maximianus hadn't gone off and essentially betrayed the Romans, not the Roman masters, but their Roman brothers in this case, right, given how he has positioned this before, that's the problem, and that's what weakens them. And I think, although he doesn't say it here, there's an implication that not only does this lead to the fall of the Britons to the Anglo-Saxons later on, but there might be an implication here also that this is one of the things that leads to the fall of the Roman Empire. Ultimately, that they don't have the Britons with them, the Britons on their side anymore because of this. And so once again here, even when historically we would see this as the Romans come, they conquer the Britons, they subjugate them, and the Britons eventually say like, all right, well, we'll be Roman citizens. Instead, Geoffrey sees this as no, the Trojan diaspora is reunited for a glorious time, but then once again is undone by treachery. And even though we have within our peasantry the manhood to defend ourselves, we just didn't have enough time and enough resources left to make that transition from peasants to soldiers and rulers again.